This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
It is almost impossible to have a bigger week than this one for the NFC West because all four teams are still alive and all four teams are in really big games against pretty good opponents this weekend. It is of course, the big one is the Cardinals and the Seahawks, but also the Niners on the road taking on the Packers. And we've got the Eagles at the Rams on Sunday Night Football. We're going to break down all three of those games because the NFC West is a fascinating division right now. We're going to talk to Meghan Payton of FanDuel TV, getting her read on those three games and her best bets at FanDuel Sportsbook for week number 12. Welcome on into Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast. My name is JimSannes. I am a managing editor at FanDuel Research, joined here once again by Meghan Payton. You can find her on Twitter at Meghan Payton7. You can check her out on FanDuel TV from noon to 2 Eastern every weekday as well. Meghan, happy week 12 to you. How you doing today?
Hey, Jim. Happy week 12. Crazy that we're already here at this point in this season. Interesting week for fantasy. A lot of teams on a bye. So hopefully you've gotten those waiver wire pickups in. But excited to go through some of the good games. We have a lot of divisional games.
I saw you to give your waiver wire pickups for this week, and I was like, oh, poor Meghan. Like, there was nothing good in the wire this week. Like, it was a barren wire. There are 6 teams on bye. So I feel like this week especially that had to be rough.
Yeah, for running backs especially. Like, there was a couple of receivers that I still think had a bit of a chance, but tough if you need an RB in your league right now.
I do need an RB in one. I think you're going to talk about him later, though. So I think that we're hopefully aligned there, and I need to be right. I need to be right on a player we'll discuss later on for today if our pre-show discussion winds up proving true. We're going to break down Meghan's thoughts on week number 12, going through all those big games in the NFC West. Also going to talk about the Super Bowl odds because the Lions are the favorite right now. Easy to understand why. We'll talk about if Meghan thinks that is correct, where she is seeing value there, and much more. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Our college football week 13 show with Riley Thomas is already up, breaking down his thoughts on this week's biggest games. Indiana, Ohio State, of course, discussed in depth there. His thoughts from that game and others across this week. Colorado, Kansas, a big one too. And then tomorrow, we're talking NFL player props. We're going to bring on Aiden Cotter of FanDuel Research, break down his thoughts on the top player props for week 12 in the NFL. Also, do not forget that we are on the brand new YouTube page, live recording all these shows along with our DFS show every Thursday with myself and Brandon Gadula. Next week, jam-packed week. We're going to have 5 shows in 3 days across the Thanksgiving week. So make sure you're subscribed to the Covering the Spread podcast feed and this new YouTube page. Leave us a thumbs up there and make sure you enable notifications to find out when we go live each and every weekday. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, an affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC. First online real money wager, only $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or visit FanDuel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. Now, Meghan, let's begin things here by talking about those Detroit Lions, now the Super Bowl favorites after a dominant win over the Jags last week, aided by a loss for the Chiefs as well. Lions are plus 350, Meghan. It makes sense, but I want to get your read on this market. Any value for you in the Lions or anywhere else in this market?
Look, Jim, it makes sense that the Lions are plus 350. They're the best team in the NFL. They're playing well on all 3 levels. I think Some people thought, well, maybe this Aiden Hutchinson injury was going to really make the Lions take a big step back. It really hasn't. I mean, they're blitzing at a high rate. They're causing a lot of pressure. And this is a team that you buy in on this locker room. It starts with the top up. And I think that's the most important thing, is that they don't have to win this year. So it's not this like all in, narrative, but they're ready. And Dan Campbell, I think it started, and I know someone said this earlier, but it started last season when, they lost in the NFC Championship. And Dan Campbell didn't say, like, we're going to be back, we're going to be ready to go. He straight up said, like, it's so difficult to get into these games. It's so difficult to be here. And I don't know, I like the camaraderie that the Detroit Lions have. And obviously they're playing that way. Take away the one outlier game for Jared Goff. He's having a fantastic season. And I'm still buying in on Detroit. If you want value and we're looking outside of the Lions, I think the AFC is a bit more open. So if you think, okay, Lions are getting in on the NFC side, I think the Ravens still have a decent amount of value at plus 800. It's take away the divisional games for Baltimore, because those are the teams that know Lamar Jackson really well. The Ravens are crushing opponents. The Bills are ahead of them in an odds board, but why? The Ravens dominated the Buffalo Bills. So I'd still be looking at Baltimore at plus 800.
I still have my eyes on a team that is going to win the division, which means they'll get at least one home playoff game. They look bad right now. They look bad, Megan. But I'm kind of still interested in the Texans a little bit. They're 17-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. And I guess, like, for me, my thought process is, if you judge the Texans based on how they look now, we're not touching 17-1. I think that's a bad number for them. But, like, they could probably figure this out eventually. And, like, I'm okay betting on that when they get Nico Collins back in the lineup, which they've gotten right now. They've got a really fun quarterback in CJ Stroud. That defense with Will Anderson looking like he'll be back this week. Derek Stingley's playing really good football. Jalen Petrie as well. I think they've got the elements. So if you force me to bet one, I might lean towards the Texans. But, like, I agree with you too on the Ravens. 8-1. They might not even win the division. They could be a wild card. They could play the Texans in the first round of the playoffs, which would stink, because I don't want either of those teams to go home right away. But, like, I at least don't want to write off the Texans just yet, despite the fact they do look objectively pretty bad right now.
Jim, you're convincing a fellow Tank Dell and Nico Collins girl to bet on the Texans. I'll absolutely endorse this. Texans Packers was preseason Super Bowl pick for me. And though Houston hasn't lived up to the expectation, let's start with, there was a lot of expectation for the Texans. So when you start with the expectation this high, it's very difficult to get to that bar. And look, CJ Stroud's played sloppy at times. This offense obviously took a major hit with Stephon Diggs out for the year. Nico Collins hurt. But when everyone, and Diggs isn't coming back this season, but when everyone's healthy, then that's when you see Joe Mixon shine everyone. He literally is on a crazy streak of 100+ rushing yards. They just have to avoid those, like, silly mistakes. Houston's definitely a top 10 team for me, and I would not write them off. And this is probably the best number we'll get the Texans at for the remainder of the year.
I think they'll play pretty well Sunday, and I think that number will shorten at that point too. So eyes on the Texans for me. Now, the Texans-Packers was your preseason Super Bowl pick. Let's talk about the other side of that matchup and talk about their game this weekend, because it is a really fun one. It's the Niners at the Packers right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. 1.5. Packers are favored by. Total in this game is 47.5. And it's kind of do or die right now for the Niners. The offense scuffled once again last week, and they're now not long shots, but they're almost, down in like the 35% range to make the playoffs, according to FanDuel Sportsbook's numbers. So can they get back in the win column this week against Green Bay?
They can, but I'm not buying in. And maybe, again, this is me being on the Packers preseason. I love Green Bay. I think they have a very high ceiling. And similarly to the Texans, they've, dealt with injuries. Jordan Love has definitely made some mistakes, 11 interceptions. You can't have that if you're going to be a postseason successful team. But Green Bay has the taste in their mouth from the divisional round of the playoffs last season. I can vividly remember watching this game, just rooting for Green Bay. Like, can you believe it? They're about to upset the 49ers after blowing out the Cowboys in wildcard round. And I believe in that kind of, extra motivation. Matt LaFleur, he's going to be ready to go. And at home all the fans at Lambeau. It's going to be a classic game. I think Purdy's going to struggle out there in the freezing cold. We've already seen him struggle a bit. And the problem with the Niners is their red zone offense has been atrocious. And Christian McCaffrey was supposed to be the saving grace for that. He really hasn't. And they can't find ways to actually, convert those drives into touchdowns. And you're not going to beat teams that way. I'll bet on the Packers in this one. I'll take them to cover here as well.
The Packers -1.5 right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. We're currently sitting at -115 on that one. And you mentioned the 49ers offense, their red zone woes. You're correct. That has been the key issue this year. And I've always been trying to identify, can they fix it? I don't know if I'm being stubborn because my numbers like the Niners a lot in the preseason. I'm like, okay, eventually they'll figure this out. Eventually Debo will look better. McCaffrey will look better. But like from a watching perspective, they have not looked better yet. Now, maybe getting George Kittle back in the fold will help. But like they haven't gotten there yet. So have you kind of abandoned hope on this getting turned around, or is it more so you want to hold off on buying into them until they kind of prove to you they've got those red zone woes fixed?
It's more of that. I mean, Look, the NFC West, thankfully, wide open. Even with a loss to the Packers, the Niners are still in it, and they can absolutely turn it around. They've got one of the best offensive minds in the game, and Kyle Shanahan, and they are getting healthier. So you do expect the Niners to be, honestly, you expect them to be a top 5 team. They're just not playing like that just yet. And so I'd rather buy in on the Packers, who I believe have shown me just a bit. I know it was a almost bad loss for them against the Bears last week, but it's a divisional matchup. Everything's always a little bit more intense. I've seen more that I like out of Green Bay right now than I have out of San Francisco. It doesn't mean that the Niners can't turn it around, but I'll still bet on Green Bay for this one.
Yeah, Christian Watson looked good in that Packers game. The Packers in general didn't look amazing, but Christian Watson did, and I think that's a good thing for them too. If they get both Reed and Watson cooking, that could be a lot of fun. So Megan likes the Packers -1.5, -115 in that one. Let's talk about the battle for, I guess, NFC West supremacy at this point, which just feels so weird. But it's the Cardinals at the Seahawks right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Cardinals now slight favorites. They are out to -112. That was not the case earlier on this week, but it's now -112. Arizona favored. The Seahawks money line -104. Total is 47.5. So Megan, I'm just going to ask you straight up because the bookmakers don't know either. This line has been going all over the place this week. Who you got between the Cardinals and the Seahawks?
I'm going with Seattle. This was a tough one for me to decide on, but ultimately watching the Seahawks beat the Niners, obviously coming in with a little bit extra momentum here. Geno Smith, when he's playing clean, the Seahawks are a great team. The Seahawks can be a true contender when they're not getting their own self-inflicted wounds, turnovers, penalties. I think the addition of Ernest Jones was bigger than anyone probably could have imagined. So the defense is playing good. Obviously, Arizona has looked good this season. Kyler Murray's been great, but I just really think that Seattle, when they're not messing up their own destiny, is a much better team than Arizona. And at home, I'll buy in on the Seahawks. And I'll take Kenneth Walker also in this game for a player prop. His yard line is at 62.5. Look at the games he's played against the Cardinals. I know a different team, averaging nearly 100 yards per game against them. It's not just like 2 games. We've got like a 5-game sample size. Kenneth Walker, I think he can burst out and have a massive game. And if it goes in my game script where Seattle's up, then they're going to run the ball more. It's always scary right now with the Seahawks offense to bet a rushing prop when we know all they're doing is airing it out. However, I do think that this line really should be at more like 70, 72.5.
Well, you mentioned the success Walker's had against the Cardinals, and that's key because like his issue this year is not that they've been throwing the ball because they've had to, because their offensive line has been tough. They haven't been playing very well. Abe Lucas was back last week for them, which is a good thing though. And even when that offensive line for the Seahawks last year wasn't great, Walker was still doing pretty well against this team. So I think that's kind of a key here is the Cardinals do struggle against the rush. We've seen Walker, despite a poor offensive line, been able to have success against in the past. So I think that's at least intriguing for him here. I want to ask you about the defense side of football, though, because I know that you've talked a lot about how much you respect Mike Macdonald as a coordinator. It kind of feels like to me, and this is my fear because I bet the Cardinals here. I was afraid that like, okay, Mike Macdonald gets Ernest Jones, he gets his guys a bye week, and he finally gets the system in place. I was pretty concerned about that. And it sounds like you're buying in, where it's a good coach who we know has a very well, he's got a good scheme, getting his players in there. It seems like maybe he hit his stride. Is that kind of what puts you on the Seattle side of things here?
It is. Look, it's always an adjustment whenever you get a new coach, whether it's a coordinator or a head coach. It's a whole new scheme. And it's not just as simple as plug and play. And you've got to give that coach time to get adjusted and for the players to understand how to play in that system. But there's a reason why the Ravens defense last season was elite. And it's because of the schemes in which Mike Macdonald created. And I think people were so quick to kind of write him off in Seattle once we didn't see early success on defense. Give the guy some time and then let him go and get those weapons like Ernest Jones. And we saw that success, I think, pretty recently. And I think it continues, honestly.
All right, so Meghan is on the Seahawks here. Their money line -104 at FanDuel Sportsbook, but also liking that Kenneth Walker rushing prop, 62.5 over is -114 right now for that one. Let's talk about the final NFC West game of this week. It is the Sunday night game. It is the Eagles at the Rams right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. Eagles favored by 2.5. Total in this game is at 48.5 right now, and it's a battle between two units that are surging. We get to watch this Rams offense that is now fully healthy take on an Eagles defense that has looked amazing with the personnel changes they've made in their secondary. So what's the read on this one, Meghan? Eagles at Rams.
I like the Eagles here. If there's a team that I'm starting to fade now in the NFC West, it's going to be the Rams. I know they're coming off a win, but I just still haven't seen enough promising factors from LA to think that they're going to be able to contend with some of the better teams. And it took me a bit to buy in to Philadelphia, to be completely honest. 6 straight wins. Forget about the Sirianni. I think Eagles fans are harsher critics on their team than the rest of the NFL is, which is just hilarious. But look, they've got complete offense with Saquon Barkley, with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. It feels like Hurts is finding his stride as well. And you can thank Kellen Moore. Sirianni's not the one calling these plays. He's going to be doing game management and whatever else. But the offense has found that stride, that momentum. And honestly, is there an NFC team right now better, or, you've got the Lions, outside of the Lions, better than the Eagles? You could argue the Commanders. Maybe you would argue the Vikings, Packers. But I think Eagles are showing us that they're here. They're a real deal. And in LA, it's not really an away game. So I would take the Eagles to cover here.
I would expect a lot of Eagles fans in LA for this game, as you alluded to. So travel definitely involved, but like from a fan perspective, we're going to see a lot of fly Eagles fly in the stands out there. Eagles -2.5, -120 right now. FanDuel Sportsbook could instead lay the 3 if you prefer to do that as well. Total in this game is at 48.5, but it's going to be a pretty tough matchup here for the Rams. And I like what I've seen out of Nacua and Kupp, but I think that it's going to be just a fun matchup, Meghan, to watch Puka Nacua against Quinyon Mitchell. Now, I think that McVay will probably move him around quite a bit, and Quinyon Mitchell does not move, but kind of hoping they stick Nacua on the right a little bit, at least so we can watch those two go head-to-head, because Nacua versus Mitchell would be a really fun matchup to watch, at least a couple of times on Sunday.
100%. That's like one of the key matchups I'm looking at for the weekend. I think we could see points in this game, though, because like you alluded to, Sean McVay isn't just going to keep Nacua one-on-one. He's going to move him and shift him all around. It's what McVay does. He finds different ways to utilize all of his offensive weapons. So I wouldn't be surprised if this did turn into a bit of a shootout.
I think that'd be a lot of fun. Okay, so Meghan is on. Eagles here, -2.5 at -120. All right, Meghan, gonna open up the board for you right now. Which other bets stand out to you for week number 12 at FanDuel Sportsbook?
All right, let's start with another, I think, really good game. We're talking NFC North, Vikings versus Bears. What's going on with the Bears? I'm not going to say there's moral victories, because we never like to say that in the NFL. But if there was like a bad beat for the Bears, it's the same beat that the Broncos had the week prior, and it's the blocked field goal, whatever. I like the way that we're seeing this offense, change for Chicago. I think that's simplified now. Obviously, they got rid of Shane Waldron as their offensive coordinator, and I think that we're going to see it just make it easier for Caleb Williams. And with that, Roschon Johnson, someone that I'm eyeing in this game. So I'm actually not going to take a side in this one. I think it'll be pretty close. But I think Roschon Johnson, anytime touchdown, is definitely worth looking at. It's at plus 155. So we saw his carries go up. We saw his usage go up, his just snap count in general. And more importantly, how they're using him on goal line situations. He got a touchdown last week. And so is he going to have the same amount of looks as DeAndre Swift? No, he's not. But I still think when they get within 5-10 yard lines, it is Roschon Johnson time. It's a tough Minnesota run defense. I am not arguing that. I'm not taking Roschon Johnson over his rushing yards, but to get in the end zone, that'd be the way I'm looking at it. I do think Chicago's offense will start to click a little bit more after last week's brutal loss.
Yeah, that Roschon Johnson touchdown mark, plus 155. I alluded to a guy I need in fantasy this week because buys have me in a tizzy. That guy's Roschon Johnson because I have James Cook on bye, Chase Brown's on bye, Alvin Kamara's on bye. It's pretty tough. Now, you talked about like the moral victories. You talked about how Denver had that tough loss to Kansas City. What'd they do the week after that, Megan? They won like 38-6. I think we could see the Bears play well. Like moral victories may not exist in like the win column, but like the Bears just needed good vibes, and they had none of that for a very long time. And like Caleb looked good in that game. I watched a lot of that game and thought he looked really good. He was running a lot more. I think that like there were signs of hope, and at some point you need a sign of hope. And so, yeah, they lost, but they got that sign of hope. And I think that actually does matter psychologically.
You know, it's kind of funny though, when I was watching this game, and not to be negative on Chicago, but it did kind of remind me about like, I feel like we'd watch Justin Fields for like the first, call it 6, 7, 8 weeks of football.
Right.
He's throwing the ball. And then finally it's like week 11 and they're just like, screw it, let him run. And like, that's what it kind of felt like with Caleb Williams is they were like, just let him do his thing. Let him play unscripted football. And it looked a little bit better. He's not having to, memorize all these wild plays and try to overcomplicate things. I don't think it's up yet, but I would be looking at a Caleb Williams over his rushing yards to see him have another. Yeah, I think they're still waiting for injuries and whatnot, but I think it's going to be a fun game. I think it's going to be close. I think Bears are definitely alive in this one.
I agree on the rushing stuff with Williams too. He looked good doing that. It seemed like they wanted him to scramble a bit more. They had some couple design runs in there too. He had 4 design runs, which tied his season high to that point. So it was definitely a big part of the game plan for Williams there. That is all that we have here for today on Covering the Spread. As mentioned, back with you once again tomorrow. We're going to talk about some player props with Aiden Cotter of FanDuel Research, breaking down his some yardage props, touchdown props, and SGP he likes as well. That'll be on this brand new YouTube page, 10 a.m. Eastern, talking about the top props for Aiden over there. And again, DFS show on the YouTube page, college football show already posted. And again, subscribe to Covering the Spread as well. Megan, appreciate the time as always. Enjoy. Hopefully a snowy game on Thursday Night Football, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Jim. If you need one more 6.5 over for Boswell kicking points, that's where I'm looking tonight.
Over 36.5 for me as well. So we're rooting for points. Whatever the route may be for this one, I'm looking forward to it. Let's get some points in that one as well. Find Megan on X at Meghan Payton 7. I am on X and Blue Sky at JimSannes. You can find FanDuel Research on X at FanDuel Research. Big thank you to our YouTube producer, Justin Lane, for his work on the video side of things. Thank you, Justin, as always. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. Talk some player props for Week 12. This has been Covering the Spread, a FanDuel Research podcast.